The number one transfer portal quarterback visiting LSU. How's it going? We've got an update locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked On LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get great podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. Thank you for helping make the Locked On Podcast Network the number one sports podcast network in the world. We've got a lot to do over the course of today's episode. We will get to I know it says right here 2 more, but 3 more as one just hit. 3 more players entering the transfer portal. The LSU Tigers have added 3 portal players here on Monday, but I want to start with quarterbacks because that's all everyone is talking about. In our most recent episode, we kind of went through the Trinidad Chambliss situation where Chambliss on Monday morning, it was announced, will return to Ole Miss provided he's granted a waiver to play an extra year. I've gone through all of this with you. Listen, I know there's a lot of Ole Miss people who are watching this show and listening to this show now. And let me first start by this, by giving an extreme compliment to Trinidad Chambliss. And I'm going to get to Sam Leavitt here in just a second because this visit's going on right now. Trinidad Chambliss is outstanding. He's one of the great stories in college football, recent or anytime memory. A Division II player who was going to go to Temple ends up at Ole Miss because they found him on Twitter, and he's a backup to a highly touted guy in Austin Simmons. Simmons gets hurt. He goes in, and boom, all of a sudden, this guy from Division II, this undersized guy, is making plays looking like a young Russ Wilson. If you told me, Matt, you could have any player in the portal, any, and I mean, if Bryce Underwood's going back to Michigan, but if Underwood were in the portal, if you could tell me you could have Leavitt or Sorsby or any of them, and if Chambliss was on the board, I'd say give me Chambliss. He is outstanding. He's so much fun to watch, and I can objectively say that. I mean that LSU fans won't like to hear that, but you can watch, like, watching that game against Georgia was deja vu. It was like watching what he did against LSU, where you're bringing pressure. He Houdini-like makes a play, and it's all of a sudden he outstanding. He did that all throughout the game. So he's awesome. Like, it's objectively true. And by the way, I hope Chambliss does get another year of eligibility. That may not be great for LSU and the rest of the SEC, but I hope he does, because you know me, if you've listened to this for any length of time, okay, if you're an everydayer, I am an extremist when it comes to portal, NIL, all that stuff. I want these young people to get everything they deserve. And I believe market value is what someone's willing to pay. And so if someone's willing to pay a quarterback $7 million in college, that's what you're worth. What would you have paid, LSU fans? What would you have paid for Joe Burrow in 2019? Doesn't matter. Blank check. Name it. So I look at Chambliss, and it's a guy who came from Ferris State, was given backup SEC money, which I know Michael Van Buren got $450 at LSU, and he was a guy who started 8 games. So I don't think Chambliss made that. And he's a guy who's led this team to the college football playoff. Like, he deserves more. And I hope he gets to, I hope sincerely he gets to cash in. Again, I don't think that's great for LSU or the SEC, but anyway. All that said, I know a lot of Ole Miss fans didn't like my opinion on this, but the opinion isn't opinion, it's fact. LSU looked at Trinidad Chambliss. He would have been their top target. The waiver is not likely to be granted. They had a decision to make. Do you wait through a legal proceeding and potentially not even have a chance at Chambliss, or do you move on? Well, they decided to move on. And I certainly believe Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weis would have preferred the guy they know. But Chambliss ultimately decided that he'll stay at Ole Miss. And I think the reason he's staying at Ole Miss is because he didn't have other options. And that's going to sound silly, I know, but the reality is, like, this was Trinidad Chambliss. I'm going to get to Leavitt in a second, I promise. This was Trinidad Chambliss before Ole Miss played Tulane in the college football playoff. When asked, if you get another year, would you return to Ole Miss?
I would have to consider, like, what the best situation is for me, what I feel most comfortable with, who I trust the most, and just get a feel for, every possibility, really. So there's a lot that goes into that.
Yeah. If you want to believe he's red and blue through and through, Johnny Reb, all die hard, like before the Tulane game, he was telling you it was open door because the plan was he was going to go to LSU. He was going to follow his coaches to LSU, and they were going to pay him. I told you the offer they had on the table. It was near $4 million. Well, what changed? Well, Ole Miss beat Georgia. They advanced. These guys haven't gone to the portal, and Ole Miss, I think, is ponied up to try to keep their guys. Good for them, which you absolutely should do, by the way. It's what LSU did last year where the boosters got pissed off after Bryce Underwood got bought by Michigan. So it's so different. It's philosophically and emotionally the same thing. So LSU fans should be able to relate to that. But Trinidad Chambliss goes on SportsCenter on Monday after announcing he's returning to Ole Miss and says this.
I made that decision last night, very late. Talked to my agent and my family, and it was the best decision. It was the best situation for me. And, I owe it to Ole Miss. Ever since I got here, from the moment I got here, on my visit in May or in April, it just felt like home. And they just embraced me as a community and just loved my family, and it just felt like home since I got here.
So let's be clear. He made the decision Sunday night into Monday morning. Well, he made that decision after LSU had hosted Sorsby. Sorsby commits to Texas Tech. LSU's got Leavitt coming in. They moved on. As I've told you, they moved on. What realistic options were out there for Trinidad Chambliss? So he signs a deal with Ole Miss pending a waiver. Well, if he gets the waiver, good for him. But if not, Ole Miss is in a lurch. Anyway, we'll see how all that develops. So LSU had to move on, and they did. And they hosted Sorsby, and it went well, but he ultimately picked Texas Tech. So now Sam Leavitt visits LSU. He arrived in Baton Rouge on Tuesday. His visit began around 2 p.m., as I'm told, and then they had a private dinner for him at Supper Club in Baton Rouge. Of course, Brandon Landry, the owner of Walk On, he and his wife Mackenzie own Supper Club. Full disclosure, Supper Club is a sponsor of my radio show. Amazing place, by the way. 10 out of 10, 11 out of 10, highly recommend. They're closed on Mondays, but they opened up for a private dinner for Leavitt on his recruiting visit. And by all accounts, that dinner went very well. Now, from people who were there, they told me, but so did Sorsby's. But again, the difference with Sorsby is Sorsby had a $5.5 million offer on the table from Texas Tech. His girlfriend transferred to Texas Tech as well to play volleyball. I'm told she got an NIL deal as well. That always felt like the way that was going to go. Leavitt, and again, this is almost like, which do you prefer? Which supermodel do you prefer? Do you want blondes or do you prefer brunettes? I mean, it's just, they're both great. It's just, what's a preference? For whatever it's worth, in the On3 portal rankings, Sam Leavitt is the number 2 overall player in the portal, the number 1 quarterback. For what it's worth, Sorsby is the number 15 overall player and the 6th best quarterback. They have Leavitt, Byron Brown, Drew Mestamaker, Josh Hoover, Dylan Raiola, and then Sorsby. That's in the On3 rankings. If you look at 24/7 portal rankings, they have Leavitt as the number 1 quarterback. They have Sorsby as the number 2 quarterback. So either way, On3, 24/7, they both have Leavitt as the number 1 quarterback. Sorsby's not far behind. It's just, which do you prefer? Sorsby's at Texas Tech, so LSU's all in now on Leavitt. Here's what's interesting. Leavitt had a visit planned to Texas Tech. He canceled it, naturally, because they signed Sorsby. Leavitt had already taken a visit to Kentucky, left his Kentucky visit, and came to LSU again, where he got to Baton Rouge on Monday, around 2 p.m., where he started his visit, went to private dinner at Supper Club. His visit is going to last through the night and into Tuesday. But what's interesting is the next caveat here is that there was another variable here. So there's a quarterback who had been committed to Nebraska. His name is Kenny Minchie. From Notre Dame, and Minchie went into the portal, had committed to Nebraska. Remember, Nebraska lost Dylan Raiola to the portal. Well, Minchie had committed to Nebraska in the portal, but now has flipped Monday to Kentucky. That would sort of tell you the writing is on the wall that Kentucky does not feel like they are going to get Sam Leavitt. For whatever it is worth, I had also been told that Leavitt got a very significant offer financially from Kentucky, but it may be a thing where he wants to go where he feels like he can win a championship and make money, and LSU's got the best of all worlds. And I'll tell you, at the time of this recording, and I'm doing this at 10:13, at this very moment is 10:13 p.m. Central Time on Monday, and I can tell you from people on the visit that Leavitt is still at Supper Club right now on his dinner visit. So that's fantastic to hear. Apparently going very well. You got to get Leavitt. You got to get a premier quarterback. The visit is Leavitt, his parents. Charlie Weiss is in town for the visit. Dane Stevens, the quarterback's coach, is there. So a small group, but they are full court press on to try to get Sam Leavitt to commit to LSU before he leaves this visit. And it feels like I am speculating here, but with Kenny Minchie flipping from Nebraska to Kentucky, that tells you Kentucky moved on. Texas Tech has already picked their quarterback in Sorsby. It feels like Leavitt and LSU right now are the match. We'll see if they can get this done. Okay, as I have more updates on that, I'll certainly pass it along. So make sure that you're subscribed on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. We'll have all the updates for you here. And make sure as well that you're checking out our website at louisianasports.net. We're giving you all the updates there. As we wait on a quarterback decision, LSU has added 3 players on Monday via the portal. I'll get to them next here. It's Locked On LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Let's be real, y'all. Managing your finances can feel overwhelming. Between subscriptions you forgot about, bills that keep going up, trying to figure out where your money actually goes each month, it's easy to feel like you're losing control. And who has time to track every transaction or hunt down hidden fees? That's where Rocket Money comes in. The personal finance app that helps you take control. It finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. You will be shocked when Rocket Money shows you what you are paying for certain subscriptions you completely forgot about. It will save you money almost instantly. So find maybe the feature you love the most. I love how it tracks subscriptions, lets you cancel them right in the app with just a few taps. There's no more hunting down customer service numbers, which is incredible. As you can imagine how incredibly frustrating that is if you've done it before. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/lockedon. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Okay, literally as I was taking that break, I got a text. I have an update on the Sam Leavitt dinner for you in just a second and who was there. But I want to thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen of the day. Thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you haven't already, please go check out the new Everydayer Club. It's access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On LSU, complete with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, every other major podcast app, and an invite to members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of this show. So please tap the link in the show notes to learn more. So at the Supper Club dinner with Sam Leavitt I got a sort of an attendee list. So the great news, as we mentioned, is Charlie Weiss Jr. is in attendance. Joe Cox, co-OC, also there as well with Leavitt's parents. Dane Stevens, LSU's quarterbacks coach, is there, and Whit Weeks is there as well. Apparently, Whit Weeks also accompanied Brendan Sorsby on his visit to Supper Club over the weekend. But there's few greater ambassadors, right? It's senior, captain, linebacker, and if you've ever had a chance to spend any time at all with Whit Weeks, you would understand how infectious his personality is, how engaging and energetic he is. And for a guy from Georgia whose dad played at Georgia, who chose to come to LSU, is coming back for his senior year, who happens to be dating the head coach's daughter. I don't know if there's any better ambassador than Whit Weeks. So that's the group at Supper Club. Again, Supper Club it's an amazing place if you've never been. If you're in Baton Rouge, 11 out of 10 recommend. Book a reservation at Supper Club. it's just a one of a kind type experience. But they closed on Monday, so they opened up for a private dining experience for this group. And I don't mind saying that because Brandon Landry, the owner, told me I could mention it on air, so I don't mind mentioning that at all. But in any event, that group of 7, a very small, intimate gathering and a private dining environment for these folks. As Sam Leavitt is just a massive target for LSU. You got to get a premier quarterback. See if they can do it here with Sam Leavitt in Baton Rouge for his visit Monday into Tuesday. Hopefully we get that answer. Now, what we did get answer on is 3 additional commitments for LSU in the portal on Monday. And I was asked if I was surprised by how seemingly slow it's been. And the answer candidly is yes. I thought when the portal opened on January 2nd that there would be sort of a first wave of commitments. Instead, you had a wave of visits through the weekend, and really the commitment's just starting now. The first commitment was Jackson Harris, the wide receiver from Hawaii, who, that's a guy, it's a big play waiting to happen. You average nearly 20 yards per reception this season at Hawaii, so you're talking about a big-time playmaker there. Well, the 3 prospects that committed to LSU on Monday, all 3 on the offensive side. So 4 commits so far, all 4 commits offensive players for LSU. And as I've mentioned, again, I think as we look at the numbers, I can't pinpoint an exact number. A lot of this is going to depend on who you can get to commit. But I think you're going to have roughly 30 commitments via the portal. And I think single-digit numbers on the defensive side. Overwhelmingly, this is going to be offense. You got to remake your offensive line. You've got to remake your receiver room. You need depth at running back, tight end, and you certainly need multiple quarterbacks. So I could see you approaching 20 offensive players, maybe single-digit defensive players. So we'll see how that all plays out. But so again, Racine Guillory was the first commitment. He's a running back from Fort Worth, 5'9", 192, small explosive back. But he was recruited to Ole Miss by Kevin Smith and ultimately chose Utah. So the relationship is there with Kevin Smith, with Lane Kiffin, with this offensive staff, and Racine Guillory. He went to Utah this year, and he was just seldom used. He had 1 carry for 4 yards in his freshman season at Utah. So this is a guy that still has 4 years of eligibility remaining. So remember here, what you're doing is you're betting on the come with a guy like Racine Guillory. He gives you a high upside potential with the staff that likes him a lot. For whatever it's worth, Wayshawn Parker had 149 rushing attempts, and their quarterback, Devin Dampier at Utah, had 146. So that was the lion's share of the rushing attempts went to those 2 guys this year. So Guillory is more of a depth piece that gives you long-term potential at LSU. The second commit they got on Monday was Malachi Thomas, a tight end from Pitt. Now, if you look at Malachi Thomas's history, he's a sophomore, 6'4", 240. So you're talking about a guy that was about 200 pounds coming out of high school. He's developed into his body. He had just 13 catches this year for 192 yards. But again, this is a depth piece behind Trey'Dez Green. You made a heavy investment into bringing back Trey'Dez Green. You've got J.D. LaFleur coming back. You added a true freshman out of the freshman class that signed in December, but now you get a veteran body here at tight end. Remember, of course, you're losing Bauer Sharp, and Donovan Green has gone into the portal. So you needed to add another body at tight end, and you've done that here, again, with Malachi Thomas, a depth piece, but someone who gives you some numbers and some growth potential there at tight end, who could be a multi-year player. I think that's part of what you're going to see with this coaching staff. Not necessarily the one-year mercenaries, but the young guys who have major college experience, who have multiple years, who could contribute this year and then maybe be standouts in 2027. Just something to file away as we kind of make our way through this depth chart. And then the third commitment that came on Monday is wide receiver Trey Brown from Old Dominion. Now, Trey Brown is a really interesting prospect because this is a guy that you're going to look at and say, oh, Old Dominion, and maybe not think super high of this. But Trey Brown is a guy that a lot of people wanted, and he is a big-bodied receiver, and you can kind of see what they're doing here. He's 6'2", 180 pounds. When you look at returning Nick Anderson, and when you look at adding a guy like Jackson Harris, who, as we talked about, Jackson Harris is a big-bodied wide receiver, from Hawaii who's coming in. You're adding guys that have size, and it is so worth mentioning. By the way, so Trey Brown was a guy who played JUCO in 2024 and then went to Old Dominion this year. So had a standout year in junior college, goes to Old Dominion, has 38 catches, 762 yards, averaged 20.1 yards per reception. So you think about both Jackson Harris and Trey Brown, both of them effectively averaged 20 yards a reception. I would tell you, think about Trey Harris, the Louisiana Tech transfer wide receiver that went to Ole Miss. Think about this coaching staff and this front office, their ability to scout talent, right? We can even talk about Kejuan Lacey. Kejuan Lacey was a lightly regarded running back who went to Missouri. And Missouri, he ultimately left Missouri for Ole Miss because Missouri brought in the number one portal back from ULM. So this is a staff where you have to ask yourselves, do you trust their evaluation? You can look and roll your eyes at an Old Dominion receiver, but they don't see an Old Dominion receiver. They see a 6'2" dude that can fly, that averages 20 yards of reception, that fits in their offense. Do you trust Lane Kiffin and his evaluation? The answer is yes. You got to be excited about the guys they've added as they continue to remake and make over that wide receiver room and the offense as a whole. Hopefully the good news is with Sam Leavitt. Well, the other side of this is you're going to bring in players via the portal, but you're going to lose portal players as well. 3 more, I know it says 2, but 3 more players hit the portal on Monday, as one was late Monday, literally as we started the show. So we'll fill you in on that here as we continue. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. Well, the portal giveth and the portal taketh away, as LSU has now added 4 commitments as of this very moment via the portal. By the time you listen to or watch this, and maybe more. 3 more players from LSU have entered the portal on Monday. We'll just go in order chronologically. So Zion Williams was the first. That is the massive defensive tackle out of Texas. So Zion Williams, as a true freshman, played in 4 games. Now, he played in the 4 games to maintain his redshirt year. Those 4 games all came later in the season. And this is a big guy that's 6'4", 365 pounds, but all 21 of his snaps came on special teams. So played in the 4 games in the regular season, did play in the bowl game, but remember the bowl game doesn't count toward your year of eligibility. So he played in the 4 regular season games and the bowl game. That's one that you hate to lose because you can go out to practice and look at 94 and go, who is that? And he's just a massive space-eating human. But I think it's also important to remember that Zion Williams, this goes to show you just how quickly things turned at LSU. Zion Williams committed to Bo Davis and signed with LSU when Bo Davis was the defensive line coach. And Davis, remember, one of those big, giant, space-eating defensive tackles. Well, Davis went to the NFL. Before spring practice, LSU hires Kyle Williams. Kyle Williams wanted smaller, more agile, athletic, get up the field, rushing interior defensive linemen like Bernard Gooden from South Florida. Well, now Kyle Williams isn't retained. So LSU has had another staff change on the defensive line with Sterling Lucas coming in from South Carolina. And Lucas was working with edge rushers at South Carolina, so we don't really know what he's looking for, but just keep in mind, if you're Zion Williams, you committed to Bo Davis, you played a year for Kyle Williams, now you got another position coach. I can understand all of these defensive linemen wanting to look for greener pastures. The fact that LSU has Dominic McKinley coming back is really significant because that's a potentially dominant interior player, but this just means your numbers are thin on the interior defensive line, and you got to go at starting defensive caliber players with Gooden and Jacoby and Guillory out. And Buddy Mathis is coming back. So there's some good young talent there as well, but you have to add proven starting talent across that defensive front. So Zion Williams entered the portal. The next LSU Tiger that entered the portal was a specialist, and that was place kicker Aaron Burrell. Burrell has been LSU's kickoff specialist. He was behind Damian Ramos as the Tigers. Ramos is the Tigers' field goal and PAT kicker. Burrell has the massive leg and has handled kickoffs for 2 seasons. He handled all 66 of LSU's kickoffs this year, and 45 of those were touchbacks. Only when he had a soft tissue injury did you start to see a little inconsistency with those kickoffs. but this is a guy with a massive leg that really just struggled with consistency that made it not necessarily a certainty. Now, I've told you here that LSU was targeting Ole Miss kicker Carneiro in the portal. Well, Carneiro, as we told you a couple days ago, has agreed. Ole Miss upped the ante for him. He's staying in Oxford. That's now been officially announced by Ole Miss. So the Tigers are going to be looking for a place kicker in 2026, probably via the transfer portal. The Florida kicker, Noel, who was recruited to Florida by Joe Houston, LSU's now special teams coordinator, is probably the most likely name to keep an eye on. And then finally, Jaden Breaker, freshman linebacker. This is a real illustration of this era. When people tell me, you have to recruit in the high school and build ranks and build your roster and just supplement in the portal, Jaden Breaker is a great example of why you can't do that anymore. This was one of the top players in the country, one of the top linebackers in the country, a 4-star recruit, the number 118 overall prospect in the country. He was a top 10 linebacker in America. You invest all the resources to recruit Jaden Breaker from Georgia. You get him. He plays on special teams for 4 games, and now he's in the transfer portal. It just doesn't make sense to go load up with high school guys, to have them sit their freshman year and then leave. You're better served going into the portal and getting a guy that's a second, third, fourth year player for 1 year than an 18-year-old that's never played. Maybe the NCAA changes the rules and it changes the dynamic and dimension of these conversations. But for now, this is what it is. And this is why you are smarter to build your roster through the portal and not through the high school ranks. Again, that is a change, but that's a change that's come about based on more evidence and a growing sample size. So Tigers continuing to build their roster via the portal, and we'll keep you up to date. And when we have an update on Sam Leavitt, we'll certainly pass it along. So make sure you're locked in. Subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. Let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you every single day for Locked on LSU. It's your team every day.